I didn't want to get in there. So hopefully, one can go on Wednesday. I hope the other can go on Wednesday. Just take minutes for that.
Okay, sit close enough where you can hear and see. I'm not going to use a microphone. I don't think I want to burst your eardrum. So I use my teacher voice. Come on over and let's find out what this is all about today.
Morning. Good morning. How are you today?
Okay, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
My name is Risa Ray Rudy, and you may have seen it printed. In print, it's spelled R-I-S-E, with dots over the E, which is a Swedish name, named after an opera singer. So I come from a long line of musicians, my mother, grandmother, great-grandfather, etc. And we'll learn about some of the music that I heard growing up, which was the foundation for much of American folk music, as well as the modern gospel music, which of course it has the roots, is the roots of jazz. That's where jazz came out of. So when we talk about the music we're going to talk about today, it kind of guided American music very early on. First of all, you need to know that I won't be playing a harp. The sacred harp is a term that was given to this type and sound of music because many years ago, as they were trying to refine and understand voices, they thought of the voices like the strings on an instrument, every voice being different and being able to sing different notes. So the sacred harp, I guess you could say, it's like putting our Christian music music into the voice, and this is how it was taught. The purpose of this was to teach the public how to sing. You know, many years ago, folks didn't learn how to do that. You may wonder, how do people learn how to sing at all? And they realized they were dealing with folks who did not all play musicians. They did not play violins and pianos and harps and everything. But they enjoyed making a joyful noise to the Lord. This music also became known as a sacred folk song of sorts. It inspired a folk song writers such as Stephen Foster, and you may have heard of William Billings. They took many of these tunes and added new words, jazzed them up a little bit, and some things that sound familiar to you will be that way because that's where the roots of many of our modern day music is found. And in the sacred harp, there was no need to really read music. Now, they had things that looked like notes, but they weren't. And they really, early on, they did not even pay attention to what the notes looked like. Okay, the early church. This is kind of where it starts. Remember, it's the sacred harp. They were trying to figure out, how are we going to teach our choir boys how to sing? How are we going to teach the parishioners how to sing and improve their sound? Because they're just out there shouting and they're just saying the words, and it's not very beautiful. It wasn't as nice as the monks and the ministers and the priests who were leading the music could do. And everybody wanted to join in. Like when we sing refrains to the pastor when he says something, the Lord be with you and also with you. And when we sing back those refrains, they weren't always easily known. Well, there was a gentleman, an Italian monk, named Guido d'Arezzo. I just always called him Guido. I always thought that was his last name. But I have had to refresh my brain because it's been a while since I talked about this. He was a monk, and he was primarily is considered to be, he's regarded as the inventor of modern musical notation that we see in our hymnals when we open them up. And it replaced what was called pneumatic notation. That doesn't matter. They just put dots on the page and tell people to sing high note. All right. He designed what was called a hexachord, 6 tones, and they called it ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la. Very similar to what you may have heard as do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, that Julie Andrews sung around about in Sound of Music. before that. This type of singing moved all the way up from Italy, all the way through Europe, and was heard in all the churches. As far back, you see his dates, 991 to approximately 1033. We know that after that, there was nothing heard of him anymore. So it's kind of unknown exactly when he died. After a while, the folks in Europe thought, why do we need all these syllables? Let's just pick out a few. And they dropped a couple. They dropped the oot and the re. And they just sang those 4 notes, fa, sol, la, and mi. And they only use those shapes and those syllables. Now, that didn't mean they only sang with 4 tones. It just meant they repeated a fa symbol, which looks like a triangle, a sol symbol, which looked like a sun, and the square. Let's look over here. Yeah. So they thought, well, this is a good idea. We'll do this. And this plan that we had to put these symbols in the books to help the people sing in the church, instead of just having words there, they now put these symbols to help them sing the words. And it was found in instruction books all throughout Europe. This is in the 18th century, 1700s, and so forth. And then it substituted all the notes on the staff sometimes. They didn't even bother with the shapes. They would just put the letters. F for fa, S for sol, L for la, and me for the M for me. Okay, here's the shapes. All right, when this music was brought to America, it came over on the boats and so forth, they wanted to teach the early Americans how to sing as well. And this is telling us how they came up with the shapes that they currently use. Fa, take on the shape like a flag. Think of the F in the flag for fa. The sol reminds us of the round sun. This was just an idea that someone came up with. La is the formation of the 2 L's, and it's joined together. And when you see it sitting on the staff, the common staff that was all used throughout the land, it would sit right within the spaces on the staff. Not turned sideways, because that was a me. Recognized by the diamond shape, and that is for the me sound. So there's our shapes: triangular, circle, square, diamond. They would use this, they'd start teaching this to children. What shape is this? That's a circle. Just like we do today with other toys that the kids identify. So this is something that's instilled in children very, very young, along with the basic things they would learn to read and write with. John Connolly, he's the one from Philadelphia. This wasn't somebody over in Italy. He devised these specially shaped notes with the note heads. Instead of the round shapes of note heads we see in modern music, he just used these shapes. And it was called solfege. Now, solfege has been around a long time too, especially over in Hungary. There was a guy named Kadai, and he used hand signals along with these shapes. Different kinds of shapes, though. All right. To teach everybody how to sing, they would open up the churches and invite folks in. They came from all over. Little churches in the country, they weren't big. They didn't have to be a big group. But some of them were. On the, up here in the right-hand corner, in the middle of the room, you see what you see? A potbelly stove, you know. This is pretty far back. This is probably just in the 1800s, a picture of it. And we have pictures over here of all these scenes. They're gathering outside this building. They're probably on a break right now, lining up to go inside the building, because it's probably hotter in the building than it is outside. You're talking about through parts of the South at this point. And then up here in the top left corner is another group, all different races gathering to sing this music. And this is an Appalachia area, through the mountains of the Appalachian region, going all the way up to Rhode Island, Maine, Vermont, all the way down through Philadelphia. This is really just something that's started in the South. Now what happened was it got in the South, and they kind of held on to the traditions a little bit to hold on to the traditions from the old to the young, you have to maintain that history. You know, if we let something go, no one's going to do it anymore. It's not going to become extinct. And nowadays, now in this age of modernizations, many scholars are going back to the roots that our music came from, and they're trying to revive it. And there's a documentary that was created several years ago called Awake My Soul, and that's the story of the Sacred Harp. The little quote down here on the bottom says, "Awake My Soul" features some of the most raucous group vocals. So when you hear this, is it going to be sounding like angels? I don't know. I don't know what the angels are going to sound like. We have in our head what we think they're going to sound like. But remember, I said that the whole point of this was to get the message of Christ out to everyone and be excited about it and spread the good news. You know, get on fire. So for these folks, they took that literally. And I want you to hear an example. We're going to listen to a short piece about how this was renewed, how in the modern day we're trying to bring it back to life. Among younger singers, later on I'm going to talk about how it's even right here in Ann Arbor. It's all throughout Michigan. It's all throughout the states, all across America and around the world. This has got footage from the Awake My Soul story, the story of the Sacred Harp. It's got some of the clips from that movie. It's a short clip. It's not only a few minutes, but I think it's worth giving you a sound and a feeling and the flavor of what the music sounds like. All right, let's see if I can get this to connect. All right, click here.
Shake walls. No microphones, no amplifiers, but you can hear them sing a half a mile away. Sacred Harp, arguably the oldest form of truly American music, is a once vibrant tradition that almost died out during the last few decades, despite the efforts of a handful of aging rural churches. But it's finally having a revival in America. And some of the new energy is coming from an unlikely place, young urbanites. Many of these fans aren't religious at all, but they're drawn to the tradition's lack of commercialism. It's a truly indie art form. Named after an 1844 hymn songbook published by B.F. White and E.J. King, Sacred Harp is a form of shape note singing, sung completely a cappella using just one instrument, the human voice. In this method, there are 4 syllables, fa, sol, la, and mi, each corresponding with a different shape, a triangle, oval, square, or diamond. The singers sit in 4 pew sections facing each other, tenor, alto, treble, and bass. At the beginning of a song, participants run through the tune once, pronouncing only the syllables. It sounds like gibberish at first, but it's helpful to practice the melody without having to worry about the words. When it's time for the lyrics, everyone remembers his or her own part. The strange sound couldn't survive out of context. Most of these voices would get booed off of American Idol in a second. Was initially used in colonial New England singing schools as a way to teach students to sight read.
Sacred harp singing kind of disappeared from, maybe you could say, a historical radar, just in part because of the types of people who used to sing. And even still, that's true, I think, to some degree. It's not something that was done in the bigger churches, it's not something that tended to be done in cities, and it's not something that was really popular in a large scale throughout the country. It was brought down to the south and to the west, where people didn't have as many instruments and where people were more interested in this kind of older style of singing and the older style of harmonies.
Massachusetts Sacred Harp Convention, held at the Northampton Center for the Arts, currently attracts more singers than any other convention in the world. They had more than 400 registered singers just this year. Perhaps Sacred Harp is catching on quickly in the North, because although the tradition disappeared for a time, that's where the style of singing was formed in the first place. Sacred harp music has received more attention in the last few years than it has in the last half-century. It had its biggest moment in the spotlight in 2003 when the music appeared in the Civil War movie Cold Mountain. Then, in 2006, filmmaker Matt Hinton released a documentary about Sacred Harp called Awake My Soul.
I think I was around 6 when I led my first song. It was Rocky Road, 294. It felt like it always feels, just overwhelming, just very powerful. And you know what? I think when you step to the Hollow Square and call your song, and they give the key, that, you know, even all these years after leading, I can still get goosebumps when that key is given and that class starts in singing.
The film now has an accompanying soundtrack packaged alongside a new compilation called Help Me to Sing. It features modern interpretations of sacred harp songs by artists like Tim Erickson, Led Zeppelin's John Paul Jones, The Innocence Mission, Elvis Perkins, and Jim Lauderdale. Hinton recently started a bi-weekly singing at St. Paul's Presbyterian Church in Atlanta. Each meeting draws at least 30 singers, many of whom are students and young professionals new to the tradition.
There just wasn't anything like this in the city of Atlanta. Lots of singings all over the place throughout Georgia. But actually in the city itself, there just wasn't anything like this. And particularly for younger people.
Not all young singers are newcomers, though. Many children and grandchildren of lifelong singers participate in the tradition, especially in the South.
My dad's a singer, my grandfather was, his father, and my children sang. And even on my mom's side, my great-great-grandfather wrote 3 tunes that are in one of the Sacred Harp books. So just really feel blessed to, you know, be in a family where this has been an important part of our lives.
David Ivey runs a camp for sacred harp singing called Camp Fa Sol La. The camp attracts hundreds of people each year.
At our camp, we have folks really come from all over the country, and even different countries. I guess last year we had about 30 states represented, and some folks also from England here. We have a really good mix of folks, kids who are traditional, who come from traditional singing or have grown up around the singing, and young folks who really just maybe heard about it a couple of years ago or just starting out.
8-year-old Holly Mixon attended camp for the first time last year. She recently led a song at the Georgia State Sacred Harp Singing Convention. Like many singers, Holly is attracted not only by the music, but also by the people she meets.
I don't think I've ever met anyone who's mean or ugly in the Sacred Harp, so, you know, act ugly.
Some learn how to sing from their grandparents, some stumble upon Sacred Harp through their best friend or favorite band, and some hear about it in a music history class. But everyone's learning from the same book. This diverse new generation of singers has one thing in common. It's up to them to keep the tradition alive.
Thanks for that great story, Kate. We'll be right back.
When the little girl was there in the middle of the square, when I was young, I was drugged to these. But then I learned to, I don't want to just sit here and be bored, so I learned how to do that also. It's quite the thing to see and hear. They were famous for doing a sacred harp singing with dinner on the ground. Now, sometimes that actually meant that the food was laid out on blankets on the ground early on, back in the early days in 1700s and so forth. As time went by, you see the bounty down here on the far right corner. Everybody would bring a dish to share. We see this common today around the world, around the country. There's some other examples of folks gathering in the scene. The girl up here in the far left corner, she's standing in what we call the well. The books, the gentleman that wrote the books and compiled them, the oldest one up here on this page is shown over here on the right. The books are lengthwise like this. So the music runs, in fact, I have a sample I'll give you in just a minute. The sound books open like this, and they're pretty heavy because they're a little bit thicker than our hymn books. But the little girls hold them like they're nothing to it. And sometimes they stand, sometimes they sit, and they do whatever they have to. And the book in the middle here, the red book, is the current edition. Now, of course, I was going to bring my book, and of course I couldn't find it. I moved up here from Georgia in the fall of 15, and I thought I had unpacked everything. And I may have, but I don't even remember where it was, and I finally got to the point where I was like, okay, I got to finish this thing. And someday I'll bring you the book. Next time we finish this up, I'll bring you the book. Yes?
Is the Harp Movement just for beat, or?
It is just for beat. And the arm movement, there's nothing fancy. This is not a conducting class. The people are there just to sing. They're not trying to, even though they are preaching, they're giving a message. They're not trying to be wonderful conductors and bringing everybody in and you and all this kind of flourish that we see so many conductors with. Just to keep the beat. The hand just swings down. If there's a 3-beat song, I'll see it done different ways. They'll go down, up, back, and down, up, and back. They'll throw it up like that. And you'll notice that some of them, I can't remember that who did it, some of the folks seated are still going to keep that beat. That's one thing they can do is sing rhythm. And they make very few mistakes. And those of us who get rusty and go in there, we sing pretty quietly to begin with until we remember what to do. They discussed B.F. White. He compiled the oldest of the books. You see his date. I was interested to come across this mark. I did not realize that he grew up in Harris County, which is middle of the state of Georgia, not far from where I grew up. And this is one of the historic markers. It's down there where he is buried, and he's buried in a very famous cemetery in Atlanta called the Oakland Cemetery. I mean, it's famous for, there's restaurants around there, and they talk about, they have ghost night watching. It's a huge cemetery. So he was credited for composing and creating this book, which was people just kept until it was falling apart. And along the way, other editions that you just saw came out. One of the men that was prominent in keeping, he's a leading figure in the contemporary Sacred Harp. And he is given the credit with being the chief promoter and goodwill of Sacred Harp and the rebirth and vitalization of it across America and around the world. He became like the ambassador. Hugh was a good friend of my grandmother's. He was, if we get time, I'll let you hear a little bit about him talking, because he was a fascinating guy. There's different pictures here. This is toward the end of his life. This is when he was teaching at one of the universities, I think it was Arizona. And then up here is when he, with the chalkboard behind him, with the shapes drawn. This was a presentation he did on the model in Washington. You know what I'm talking about, the big model. Okay. So, I guess, again, very renowned. Now, before we go and hear him sing, I'll come back to this slide. This is something I haven't taught you. I want to go ahead and show you this. They talked about this setup. In music, you've heard of soprano, alto, tenor, bass, mostly, I'm sure. In Sacred Heart music, the soprano and the tenor lines are interchangeable. And because early on there were more men that came to these singings, they would sing the melody, and that began to be called the tenors or the trebles. The tenors sometimes were the women, and the altos sat across from them. Those were the low women's voices. Here was the high. Here's the low men. There's the high men. Are there people that switch around? Yes. There's some men that will go sit with the trebles and ladies that will go sit with the tenors. Typically, the melody line that everyone's familiar with was a tenor line. So when we look at the music, you'll see that. And you can see the shape here on the bottom corner. And those churches that I showed you about, many times the old primitive churches were shaped square, just like the tabernacles. And they would leave the open space in the middle for the leader to come into. The day would start with a prayer, and the scripture of the day was whatever song they were singing, because everything was just full of the gospel. And it's hard not to, when you go hear this, and you're in the midst of it, it's an overwhelming sound. Let's see. It's documented. I got a kick out of this poster up here. I had this picture for a while, wanting new singers. This was Unitarian Church in Princess Street, and that is actually a poster that went up in Scotland, where there was a big revival. And over here we have a Danish tapestry. Can you see the square in the middle? They're doing their best to do that, to show that up. And by the way, you might say, well, where does the congregation sit to listen to this? You become a part of the singers. Just pick a side, sit down, and sing along. And if you listen to the first time through the song, they will sing the syllables, fa, sol, la, mi, and then they'll sing the verses. So even if you didn't feel comfortable reading the notes yet, if you listen to them carefully, they're going to teach you your part, and then you just sing along with it. So you see some people out here that are pretending, I guess this is a big treble section down here. And you've got the food and everything spread around it. This is a great illustration of what it would have looked like. And you notice they're arriving on the horse and buggies and carts and horses and so forth. It takes us back a while. This is not just something that came out of the South. I think you heard her say, and I talked to you about it. Started with Guido over to Italy and then worked its way up through Europe. And as it began to fizzle out, it came to America, and then it's had its rebirth. It fell out of New England, came back to the South, and then it started spreading back up. And so here's just some different posters and signs from all the United States to Massachusetts, advertising for people to come to Brooklyn, Texas, Los Angeles. You thought that they just were little heathens out there, but no, they've got the Sacred Harp out there too. I don't know if you heard her say in the documentary, she mentioned the fact not everyone who comes to the Sacred Harp singing agree theologically. But you know, if you sit there and hear this message and over again, I have doubts in how long they're going to stay that way. Now, this is my most fascinating thing to show you. Notice the date on the left and the title. U of M, all day sacred singing. University of Michigan, Theater and Dance, Emerson Hall, Saturday, March 24, 2018. Yes, well, I have good news for you. They have them all the time. And not to be outdone by Ohio, I had to throw them in. So they had the same thing in 17, and this is just a sample of one of the advertisements they would put out. All across the ocean, out to Hawaii, that's what the one over here on the left, Kentucky, how fancy that is, you're on the little square house. Come as you are. There's no dressing up, you don't have to get fancy. You come off the field, plow in the field, and this is how you can spend your evening many times. This is before TVs and all these things also. New York City, Sacred Heart. So just when you thought it couldn't get any different. And then around the world, I just kind of pulled out some different things from England, Great Britain altogether, Poland, London, Ireland, Canada, Scotland, Germany, France, Norway, and recently Australia in the last 75 years. So it's vital and alive, and the gentleman, Hugh McGraw, that I told you about, went to all these places. He lived till he was 87, and spent his time, pushing forth the traditions. And when you asked me a while ago, or maybe I said, what's the conductor for? They don't rehearse. And they don't perform. We just sing. And the performers are the audience. And the audience is the performers. Now, as we're passing out these samples, because I do want you to have a chance to do that, pass those around. If you don't, looks like we got 20, so if you'll have extra, okay. I don't want to just throw you into the heat of things, but I thought I'd let you at least be looking over this, and we'll hear a little bit from Mr. McGraw. Like I said, he was a businessman, and he worked in a sewing company in Bremen. When I go down to visit my family in Georgia, that's in Harrison County, that's one of the county seats, and that's where he worked and lived all of his life. My grandmother was a neighbor, and they first met when he was working on he was a supervisor on the sewing line where they made suits and hats and things like that, and my grandmother was one of the seamstresses. And one time on a break, they got to talking, and they found out that they both had grown up with Sacred Harp. But he found out that she knew more than he did, because she was taking the Sacred Harp when she was 2 or 3. My grandmother continued. She went on past Sacred Heart. That's why I said this is another lesson. This is a whole other lesson. Up here is a sample of the books that she wrote in. She published over 200 songs, and we have recorded much of her music before she died. She died in 2005 at the age of 96. The first little book over here is the first book she published in 1948, and she published in every book within 3 companies until the year she died, 2005. She died in October 2005, and this was published that fall. The fall she died. The song was in his book. Anyway, that's the connection of him to me, and I've gone to several of his singings, and he is quite inspirational. Yes. I just want you to hear a little bit of flavor of him and his presentation. Tell me when we're out of time or something.
I went to my first singing school in 1953. I asked Tom McGraw, I said, Uncle Tom, how long does it take you to learn how to sing this Sacred Harp? He says, 4 years. And I said, well, I've been working on it hard for 1. I ain't got 3 more to go. He said, well, you got 4 years. It's just like going to school and getting a high school education and getting a college education. He said, you don't get it all in 1 week. I was grown, and I went to a reunion down at Mount Zion on the 4th weekend in July, and I just walked in the back door and sat down on the back pew, and Bernice Hambrick was leading
right there.
Alabama, page 196. And when I heard that, when I sat down and heard that, it just like I'd received salvation. Goose pimples was all over me. And I went up there, after the singing, I went up there and talked to Uncle Bud, and I said, Bud, can I learn how to sing this music? And he said, yeah, you got about enough McGraw in you that you can learn to sing. He said, I got some old books down at my house, I'll give you a song book. And I went down there that night and got a book with no back in it. It just, the backs had been torn off. And I carried that thing around my back pocket for the longest, hollering fossil lot. Jesus and Sally, ever be a mortal man, sing of thee, I remember in 1954 or 55, we'd always go down to Headland, Alabama, in Buford, Studebaker, And we wasn't allowed to roll the windows down in the car all the way down there. We had to keep the windows up. But when we turned around, when we started back, now we could sing going down there, but couldn't raise, y'all didn't want to mess your hair up. And when we come back, we'd let the tailgate down and raise all the windows down, and y'all would hang your legs out the back and sing all the way back, but didn't care about your hair coming back from singing. We'd get in a van and we'd go to Texas together, and we'd take the whole crowd. We was going along one night, and we got to arguing about those spaces in the road where they have a marker so many feet, and they have a blank, and they pick up again. And we got to betting on how far it was on those markers, and at night, so they looked real close. So we all put up a little money, nickel of a dime, and we stopped and measured at night, measured it, and they're 30 feet apart. 30 feet.
Hugh McGraw is widely regarded as the leading sacred harp singer of the past 50 years. He was instrumental in the nationwide spread of this music that had seemed destined to remain relegated to the rural South. He and countless other traditional Southern singers traveled thousands of miles to bring the music they loved to eager young singers in the North and Midwest in the late 70s and early 80s. They were the apostles of the gospel of the sacred harp, and many new singing communities outside the traditional home of the sacred harp now look to these singers as the founders of their home singings. Today, sacred harp is sung across the United States and even in some foreign countries. But despite the distance between these singers, they consider themselves to be a family who together seek the old paths and walk therein.
Well, there you go. I just wanted you to kind of get a flavor for him, and he never forgot a face. He would remember you. I mean, I went to singing when I was a teenager and so forth, but it was, he always remembered my name, even after 50 years.
Do we get to sing?
Yes, I'm going to get it up here so you can sing. All right. I'm pulling this slide right here. Okay, the reason what happened to it? Hold on. Yeah. Okay, you got the music. The idea was to kind of show you along as we go. On the left-hand side of Marilla's lesson, it's got the shape notes, the fa, sol, la, mi, fa. Now, you can give it your best shot, pick a line. Notice that how they're arranged. The melody that you're going to be, I don't know if you'll be familiar with it or not. The melody's in the third staff down. That's the third staff of music now. And again, they would sing the words through, the notes through. The words didn't come out very clear on this. Again, I couldn't find my book to make a good copy, so I had to go to other resorts to do it. So, let's see if you can keep up with it. Probably when you hear the words, you'll think, okay, I can at least sing the words. We'll do a little bit of this one. Because I failed to tell you, when they do the repeat, they bring that second line of words up there. Again, very hard to see. When I find it, I'll be more apologetic. Let's go to another song that there's pictures of it. Just put them up here for you. New Britain. Next page. One you're going to know. By the way, all these melodies, the last song was called Marilla's Lesson. That's a common song, but in the book, it is called Oh Columbia. Columbia. I don't know if you've ever noticed in our hymn books, in the bottom corners of them, sometimes they'll have the name Heaven, and they'll have the name Glory Town, or whatever the hymn tune is. And other composers will come along and put new words with it. They'll pick up that tune. It's just like the Star-Spangled Banner is not a song that Francis Scott Key wrote. He put those words to that tune. Called Immaculate in Heaven. All right, let's listen to a little bit of New Britain if you need to go to the next service. Go ahead, all of that, let's let it go. You're tuning up. They're not singing words that are on this paper. You know, Amazing Grace has like 7 verses. And if you're in a hymn book in a different church, they're going to pick out different ones to sing. And this is just giving you an example. This is called Columbia. That's the tune. So, in a little brief lesson, that is what sacred music is. And from this is where gospel music came, and they went back. Last page. My grandmother wrote in the 7-note shape system. They added back in do and re and ti. And it moved me where it currently is. The sacred harp scale is sung fa, sol, la, mi, fa, which is do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. But if in doubt, all you have to do is sing so, la, and fa. So is the round one. La is the one that has the little 2 L's, that's the square one, and fa is the F. So that, the flat, the one that's not flat. And here I put down an address, and you might want to Google it. They didn't like, I should have put it on this paper. www.fasolamichigan.org. And on this link, I think I can get it to open up. Notice, here's the regular singings. East Lansing, Ann Arbor singings at the 2nd Tuesday of every month. Hello. This should open up to what the web page looks like. And they'll throw samples up there oftentimes. Now it opens up a while ago, but we might not do it now. And you can see where they're going, where they're going to be, and you can hear little pieces of it. So that's possible singing. And I remember my professors in college, when I got into graduate school, they were all of a sudden just, I don't want to download it, I just want you to go to it. Anyway, they got into a kick of going to it. They went all over the country singing it. brought back songs from Billings and up in New England, and we found the roots everywhere, and that's it.
Do you know where do they meet in Ann Arbor, do you know?
Well, bring up the website.
The
Let me see
Ark.
if I-
They meet at the Ark. I don't know if this group meets at the Ark, but the Ark does have, nah,
Oh, wait, it's,
just had it here.
I can look it up on their website.
no. Let me bring this back up.
They do once a month at the Ark, and it's Sunday afternoons.
What my sign say? My thing says,
She just looked up the Ark website.
Yeah,
Plus a lot.
They call it Shape Note Singing at the Ark.
yeah,
Non-denominational community musical event, regularly meets on the second Sunday of the month, September through June, from 2 to 5. Free to attend and all are welcome. No experience necessary.
because they're just gonna teach you the shape.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a so, that's a la, and that's a fa. Remember the flag. So, take this with you, go to that website, and you can.
Thank
Hey.
Thank you, Reese.
Fascinating.
I've never heard of it.